professional soon?
Yeah, the professional panelists will come in soon,
So,
there you go. Smile.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because it's only for streaming.
This is only for streaming.
Yeah, exactly. So it's working.
But I've been pressing.
I can guarantee you that I will forget to use this sometime, so I apologize to the stream.
But everybody can hear them, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Luke.
They're talking for go ahead and pass the 15 minutes.
Okay. So, hello everybody.
This is only for the streaming.
This is the second edition of
I'm just giving the streaming a special.
Yeah. He's the golf announcer in the back.
This is the.
Pedro lives up his golf team.
This is going to be
And he's starting the introduction.
You knew what you were getting into when you invited us to on the panel. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but this year I didn't put beer here for a reason, right?
I don't know if my streaming thing is even on.
No idea.
That was a terrible idea.
Last year there was some beer involved.
Yes, there was.
That's why this year it doesn't.
That's why we had more audience members.
Yes. And actually, there is beer. It's all downstairs.
We had some.
Low budget.
That we have a place.
Low budget event. But
How about somebody?
Runs
Any blue, are there any blue badges in the room? Besides
there
Josh,
should be.
we can send them down to get the beer. Just get like 1, 2, 3.
Antoni's not here, but
get
There are
like 25
there are a
beers.
lot of blue badges on the room.
There are.
I like how they're like.
Like Microsoft.
Raise,
Like a ton of them back there.
raise the hand.
I don't have a badge.
Who in the live streaming audience thinks we should send the Microsoft employees downstairs to get the beer?
Okay. This is going to be.
I have a badge that one of you can borrow.
I have mine, I'm just being difficult.
I know. I'm removing all.
Where are we going?
Yeah, first was 04, right? Beer for.
Never mind the beer, beat the pizza.
No, the beer. Forget the pizza. Okay, but
No, I'll behave now.
as I was telling, really?
Are you on mic? Are you going to be on the stream?
Yeah.
No, because I'm going to tell you a secret. He's starting to stream. It's not streaming.
Oh, we're not streaming.
It's doing updates. I don't know.
Oh, what was that?
Perfect time.
Also,
I don't know who's to blame for
start
it,
all over.
but
We have to start all over. Okay, so Pedro.
So-
Okay, Pedro.
as I was telling everybody, this is very difficult.
Pedro,
I
you're losing
understand
control
Richard
of
now.
the panel again.
I understand Richard.
2 years in a row.
And I understand Richard why he went home sooner.
He didn't go home sooner. It was always his plan.
Yeah.
Pedro, you're losing control of the panel.
Okay, as I was telling you, this is the second year. Last year it went pretty well. We had Josh, Steve, and Duncan. I don't know if you remember.
You're Duncan now.
Yeah, Duncan.
Your name is now
You're now
Duncan,
new
right?
Duncan.
And we,
You have to have a British
the
accent.
idea was to talk about what happened on the IoT ecosystem on the last 3 to 4 days and on the last year. And we had the same idea this year. It was not new. And we invited more or less the same persons. I personally invited Duncan, but he said to me, well, I have a meeting and I couldn't go. In fact, yeah, I think he's in...
I don't think he's in Lisbon.
No, he's in the US, he's in San Francisco. So
I see.
I think there's a good reason for it.
I see
So
Duncan enough
this
in
year we
person.
got like the same tree, like with Duncan in the middle, and the idea is to talk about it. So everybody that has questions about it, everybody that wants to know anything from these guys, I don't know why, but they are here. And please ask away.
So maybe we should have one of these for the audience.
Yeah, that's my
I think I
job.
might have broke it. Because it's making that sound. Yeah, that sound.
That's my job.
To break the
Break it?
microphone.
Okay,
to
good. Awesome.
make
I'm
it,
done.
take it.
I'm cut off.
I thought it was maracas.
A little bit
That's
introduction
the
about
Duncan special. We cannot pass it to us.
a little bit introduction about the people that's here. Steve is,
Hi.
I don't know, an investor right now.
No,
What do you do?
I don't know what I do. I come to Web Summit.
You came to the Web Summit, yeah. He's an investor. He has a company called
Which
Frisco.
really you could define that as he's an alcoholic this week.
I used to drink a lot this week.
Oh, wow.
I was actually very busy.
A lot.
Like emceeing and speaking. A little bit.
Ah, okay. He is an investor from a company called Fresco Capital. He was also the former CTO of Telerik, right? I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
all good. Yeah.
And how
Don't-
many
don't
startups
blame-
did you have in closed? Sold?
5.
How many?
5.
5. Okay,
5
so
venture-backed startups.
I guess he has a lot of experience there.
So
can
you
ask
do
him.
stuff.
I do stuff.
Cool.
Paul, I'm not sure, so please
John.
John, oh,
Duncan, John. I'm
John.
Right.
So,
Just don't call him late for dinner.
I'm the CEO for Remo Health. We're a semi-venture-backed startup is the best way to put it. We do personal data analytics in the healthcare space, specifically to the senior vertical, using a wearable device. And one of our partners is Microsoft. We're part of the 2014 IoT Accelerator class out of Seattle.
so
Out of Seattle.
Out of Seattle.
You want to be in
Boss
Florida.
made it.
another way.
So Boss is the guy that I was telling you about that runs all the crazy
He's
startups.
way more interesting than me.
Next from Gary Kasparov.
Always a Dutch.
So we are live stream, by the way.
Yeah,
Well, not at the moment. Not at the moment. I just wanted to just.
Everything you say can and will be televised.
Yes.
Awesome.
okay, and Josh is working for Microsoft currently and in the last a lot of years. And
This is always an interesting part to see what people make up about me. But go ahead.
well, I know what you did like in the
Worst
last.
MC ever. Just saying.
Yeah, for sure. I met Josh a while back when he was working on the IoT space and talking with companies about it. Then you moved to partners,
Sure.
and now you are doing.
Stuff.
Things.
So the group that I'm in is called CSE, Commercial Software Engineering. We're about 700 engineers worldwide. We're split up into 3 time zones. Our mission is to help companies and our partners reach their greatest innovations. And then the code that we write, because we partner with them and write code with them, the code we write, we open source. And so I've got a team of 700 engineers that our job is writing open source software. And you've got some of them here based in Lisbon. We've got people in London. We've got et cetera. I am the chief engineer for the Americas, but I lived in Ireland for 3 years and was there when Web Summit kind of got caught fire and started to explode. So I have been to every Web Summit since 2011. So I was here this year talking about how we're using big data analytics to help combat human trafficking and some other fun stuff. So, but that's not the topic tonight. If you want to talk about that, you'll have to bring me beer after the panel.
He works a lot more than you.
It's good. I have
So it's less involved.
I have a pass from a higher authority.
Okay, not to work. Yes, you have.
So we pretty much got a guy who does stuff, a guy who sells stuff, and then
I don't sell anything.
watch out their health while they do that.
It's good.
That's
Perfect startup.
Except I don't sell anything, but that's okay.
So, starting from here, what do you think of this year's Web Summit?
We were talking about that before when you came in. I thought it was very good. I probably thought in some areas there was just way too crowded, but that's to be expected in a big event. But the content was great, keynotes were good. Got to see a lot of really good stuff, and I was actually on stage emceeing a whole track all day yesterday. And last year and previous years, Web Summit was always bouncing around between tracks. So I actually got to see like a track from start to finish. It was actually an interesting experience because the thought that was put in by the producer of that track was quite interesting. So it was the autonomous vehicle, or basically the future of automotive track. So everything from starting with LiDAR technology, going all the way out to like self-driving cars and transportation as a service and stuff like that. So that's good.
It was good.
Yeah.
Planning to get back next year.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
If he stays at your home.
Yeah, I'm crashing your Wait, how far are you from the venue?
It's nearby.
Maybe I'll pull the audience from those closer.
So yeah, he was pointing that direction. Now, I mean, that could be
Morocco?
We don't know.
That direction, a few hours you get to Barcelona, so...
No, Barcelona is not a good topic to talk with Steve. He doesn't like Barcelona.
I don't know what you're talking about.
They let you back.
I've never been to Barcelona. You can't prove things.
I'm not wanted by the police there.
John?
I like this year a lot. I've been coming for the last 5 years. This is my second company I brought to Web Summit. We're based in America, and so I've been probably some of my most close friends that I've made every year when I come to Web Summit, as well as some of the best business connections that I've made in the international community coming every year. So it's been interesting to see This year it's definitely bigger, and that's good and bad, I think, is the reality of it. When it used to be a small, cute little thing, it was kind of nice and intimate, but now the scale has also afforded to meet a lot of different people that I wouldn't have expected to talk around to. So we had our booth out there today, and amazed at the response and how well it went.
Josh?
It's 60,000 of my closest friends. It's an absolutely amazing conference. I mean, the Web Summit crew just keeps getting more efficient and better at running this event. I mean, they're scaling and they're, you know, so on and so forth. But this year, it was kind of like, I don't know, I felt like this year the logistics actually caught up with the size. Whereas every other year, the logistics were about, you know, were just shy of what the capacity was.
Like registration, everything but lunch.
Everything but lunch. Everything but lunch. Yeah, lunch they can still fix, but outside of that, I was actually really impressed with the logistics of the event. I've been going to Web Summit since it was 300 people in the basement of an accountancy. In a room not a whole lot bigger than this, and I've been to everyone since then. So I know the staff real well, and I know, you know, so they're doing a great job. Content was fantastic. The quality bar on I mean, with volume comes, you know, there is a higher caliber of startup will come. There's still a lot of startups that you know I'm not overly excited about, but I got to meet some really interesting and exciting ones, and people that are going to literally change the world.
So I have a startup question for you then.
Yes.
Why does every big conference like this have to have a startup competition?
Because they want to get somebody to sponsor it, and that's one of the ways they get a big check.
The startups or the event planners?
The event planners.
The event, we have so much scale now with the event, they don't need that extra 100K check.
No, I know. I think it's interesting. It is a quick and easy way to showcase a bunch of startups in a quick and easy way.
Yeah,
I know we don't do them, so we don't like them. I haven't done them before. I think it's one of those things that it depends on what kind of exposure you can get through other channels. So if you already have, I'm a big fan of little company partnering with large companies, leveraging their brand equity to kind of get your word out, use their media presence. We're a good use case for a lot of our partners like Microsoft, Samsung, and some of the others, so we get to leverage their messaging, which is a lot better way to do it instead of, I think the pitch competition is a great way to see who can stand up on stage and spit something out for 5 minutes. It doesn't really give you a good idea how good the business is.
And my take is, you know, I mean, 60,000 of my closest friends, I kind of joke about that, but, you know, when people ask me, you know, what's the advice for coming to Web Summit, I'm like, look, 60,000 people, there are going to be 300 people there that you want to meet. Right? And it's probably 10 that actually matter, but you're going to have to weed through 300 to get to the 10. But what 300 do you go after? Have a plan before you show up. And I'm going to get on stage and talk to a random crowd of people is not a plan. So I agree with John here. I don't think that they're overly valuable for the startup, but you know, you can potentially get some cachet out of it. And you know, if you don't know how to reach investors, that's a different problem. But it's one way.
As a professional investor,
yeah.
I actually put zero value on
Yeah.
any form of startup competition.
Good.
Right, so that's actually why I asked, and I find that every single tech event that I go to has a startup competition, and I'm like, it's actually not what we look for as an investor. And then at the same time, like the guy who runs like Techstars, or you know, was like talking to me about like this, you know, event that they're doing to try to bring their startups to like venture capitalists, and I say, we're beyond the stage where startups can't find the VCs.
Right.
Like, so if you're a startup and you need to use your Techstars, this or like the VCs are out there, and they're desperate actually to find startups. But
Good.
yes, sir.
I know by accident that there are also a lot of events do a startup event because the local government wants them to do it, and the local government wants to have the startups in the neighborhood actually participate in the events. So it also spreads the information that it's a good startup scene, which creates more revenue for the local government.
But the booths are fine for that. So I walked up and down the booths and I glanced at probably 200 startups and talked to a handful of them, right? I don't necessarily need a competition to go do that.
No, but they use the local media to get the local startups and the local media to get more media attention. That's basically the only thing I ever saw that was useful.
So
in Portugal, we did it before, last year at least. We did it before. It was a way of having Portuguese startups on the Web Summit. There was a competition before, at the Beato that we were talking about a while back.
So I don't want to derail the conversation on this topic, but I want to make one more important point, because especially if you're working on startups, and I think some of you are, is so this actually comes from the fact that one of the things that Pedro didn't mention is I run an accelerator at the Vatican. Right, so it's a pretty unique accelerator, but it's a real.
You run an
accelerator at the Vatican.
City?
Yes. So I spent the whole summer in Vatican City.
Eternity comes to mind.
Whole separate conversation. I'm talking to them, and I'm like, hey, we need to deal with this. Like, we're working on startup speed, and they're like, Steve, our timeline is eternity. Whole different conversation. But when we went through, so we gave a typical accelerator, $100,000, program in Rome. We actually have our demo day coming up in about 3 weeks back in Vatican City. And so regular accelerator, $100,000, good money. I can't tell you how many people that we made our initial cut of, maybe like we were trying to choose about 10 teams, 10 companies. We made our initial cut of about 25. And then we worked with, I drafted poor Pedro, we gave them a mentor and worked with them for a month or two, and then started whittling it down to the 10 or so. I can't tell you how many of them they're so used to going to competitions, were surprised that we would take 8% equity in exchange for $100,000 and a 9-week program in Rome and all the other type of benefits that we had. We had 26 mentors come in person during that 9-week period. We had
And the
programs.
quality of the mentors.
Oh yeah, people way smarter than me, for sure. But that's not saying much. And
Low bar.
very low bar. Very low bar. So that was the first problem I found. The second problem is now some of these companies now have more or less graduated from the accelerator. The accelerator is just about over. We have about 2 weeks left. We're doing it virtually now until we go back. We go back to Rome, as I said, in 2 or 3 weeks. This company, I don't want to pick on them, but they've went to Startup Grind. They're doing startup competitions. And I'm like, you just went through an accelerator, you just gave me 8% of your company, and you're going this demo day, and being at the Vatican, it's going to be a little bit more amplification than a typical demo day. So why are you going to startup competitions? And they don't understand that that's a waste of their time, right?
Yep.
So I kind of feel like it's a moral hazard that these big events and all these startup competitions exist, because it also creates this contest mentality where then I'm better than you or you're better than me, where the reality of it is someone who runs both a venture capital portfolio and an accelerator, I want every single one of those startups that I put money into to succeed and have IPOs and make lots of money for everyone. I don't want it to be a competition that you're better than this person, that's better than that person, that's better than that person.
Next time, you make sure that if they're applying for your accelerator, they have to sign off in running into any startup competition.
That could be good.
There you go.
I kind of like that, and I'm going to steal that. What's your name, sir?
Ricardo.
Ricardo? I'm going to call it the Ricardo rule.
Yeah.
to give you credit.
But that's going to cost you. So you better pick up a name.
Well, I'm going to still call it the Ricardo rule.
Okay.
I'll name it after Daniel Ricardo, the race driver.
There you go.
But secretly,
No,
we
seriously,
know.
I'm
it's a good point.
a complete disbeliever in all this startup shit. It goes nowhere.
I call it startup entertainment.
Yes.
Right, so I'm a professional investor, and I consistently tell startups not to do it, but they do it.
You know what it actually reminds me of? Pageant contest.
Yes, it's a pageant contest.
Right.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Absolutely.
We're beautiful.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
We
Yep.
can try to say a couple of
I disagree
interesting
because-
things.
Well, that's
I
what
want
we're
to
next.
be Miss
Really done.
World.
All right,
Come on.
So-
we have a counter opinion.
Yeah,
Let's hear it.
Fire away.
Because sorry, I'm one of those guys that goes to startup competition.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's because
For fun. To me and you.
As a audience member or as a participant?
As a guy that's competes there.
Okay, so you're pitching.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
But the thing is, we had open room.
I gotta say, this is the best blue badge effort I ever saw.
So
I
I
do
just need to give props to my
props.
team there. We were at the Microsoft booth and we were running
Audience
HoloLens
first.
Labs.
Yeah, just
Yep.
put it on.
We were running HoloLens Labs at the booth, and this is the team that I assembled. And they delivered all week.
Awesome.
So, you're so wonderful. Thank you.
She opened them.
There it is. Wow.
Oh,
That's the flash one.
No. Last year we had the guy in the tap.
Definitely, these are good for Donald Trump. Well, we're getting, don't worry, we got you. Just pause. Pause your thought.
Yeah, you'll win the contest this time.
I don't mean to win the contest. That's exactly what I'm saying. I use startup competitions not to win contests, to learn something and to get with other guys that usually are smarter than me.
Don't look at me.
Yeah.
I'm down
Yeah,
here.
sure.
So
But I try to do that to improve what I'm developing.
So what is the status then in like, are you based here in Lisbon?
No, not at all. I'm not even. We had some projects, like our project, not startups, like
But
things.
it's not really a startup competition that you are speaking of. You're speaking about hackathon,
It's a
which is
proto
different
startup.
category.
Not
Hackathons are
really
cool,
because-
my book. I
because
love hackathons.
It's not really an hackathon because you have you have a program, you have a mentorship, you have like I'm talking about smart open music. It's one of them. Okay.
It's in the middle, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that like a startup weekend, or is that
No.
Okay.
It's a program from BetaI. BetaI is one of the accelerators here in Portugal.
Okay.
They are all over the place, and they have many programs. One of those is with municipality,
Yeah.
municipality, and they have a program with I think it's 3 months where you develop, you pitch it, you test it, you develop, and then you test it on the city. But the thing that I learned about this kind of context is that you get mentorship, so it's cool. For a starting idea, you are able to get some tools like, okay, I have an idea, but do I have a business? Or how do I validate? So you get the startup school. So I think that context.
But that's appropriate.
For that, it's cool.
Yeah.
Probably you are looking for something else, not in this embryonic phase. So I understand how to.
But I think there's a big difference between a quality accelerator with a program that you get some value out of versus standing around and talking about what you do. And so I've seen a lot of it that the watchpreneur cycle, what do you do? We do startup competitions, and that's about all they really do. And if I invested in them, I'd want to know, when are you working on your business if you're always polishing this 5-minute pitch? Because that's not real. So this is my 4th startup I've done. We've been doing this one for 4 years now. And any meaningful investor I've ever had, it was a hell of a lot more than a 5-minute conversation that they wanted to know who we are, what do we do, how does our brain work, what are we going to do when it turns to shit, and what's going to happen next.
They probably
that's what they
poke
really
you
want.
to the very last cell you had.
And so that's where I look at it as, we've done 2 very good accelerators, Microsoft one of them, the Jumpstart Foundry out of Nashville is the other one we went to get our healthcare education. That's where we opt in, and they've invested in us 3 times too. And so it's one of those things that I think there's a lot more value in spending quality time that way than just standing on stage and seeing who can spit something out of their face.
Yeah, so if you are in a pitch context, it's different from a program. Yeah.
So and I'll land somewhere between. You should do them and should not do them. I think if you're at an event and they happen to have one, I don't know that there's necessarily a harm in doing it. I would not go to one. Like I wouldn't travel for a pitch competition, and I get very angry when there was a startup that we were going to go code with them. I was going to fly them up to London to sit with us. They're actually in Kenya, and I was going to fly them from Kenya to London to come code with them and help them get their product off the ground. And they turned us down because there was a pitch competition in Austin that they wanted to go pitch at, and I was like,
Jesus.
Yeah.
So that ain't real.
Right then.
That happens all the time.
No,
all the time.
more than you could possibly imagine. And so I flipped the bozo bit on them, and it is okay. Don't call us. I'll call you someday, maybe, if I get bored.
Yeah, so the last thing I'll say about it is if at Web Summit they have a startup pitch stage and 500 people, 1,000 people are watching it, I'm saying, okay, that's what the audience wants. But the startup pitch stages have about 15 people there, and it's usually the other startups waiting to pitch and whatever friend they dragged. And I was there as a judge one day, and it was like 2 people that were just waiting for me to be finished because I told them, meet me at the startup pitch and I'll meet you after, right? So I mean, more or less the audience isn't begging for the startup pitches either, right? So that's all.
And
When the conditions are bad, you don't
I
do
think
it.
it's easy to understand. Probably nobody recalls the startup that was on the startup pitch from here. Does somebody can
It
say a
happens.
name?
Yeah,
I don't recall startups at all.
yeah, because they were next to me.
From here, not, but
Remember
things
the
like,
mirror you had on the wall, Hong Kong?
yeah, but things
And
like
the company
Talk
called
Desk
Zoom?
started it.
Yeah, it's true. But
Yeah, but you know, start, you
That's
know,
a very nice
Talktest and
reflection of the
Farfetch and a lot of them,
Perfect's not true.
you know the
Farfetch is
unicorns because they became unicorns. Not
Yeah,
because they were in
Farfetch-
some pitching
Farfetch was a bit
contest.
different. Uniplaces was a bit different, but Unbevel it was a lot of difference. But yeah, I'm just talking about Portuguese guys.
Yep.
But probably the one that went to a startup contest and then get traction was really Talktest.
yeah, it's true.
But then went to the States.
My point is, I've been there like the 3 days, and I don't recall
Yeah.
any startup from the startup contest. I didn't, never watched it.
Oddly enough, I recall some of the companies that were on this event last year.
Yeah, it's true.
This is not a good sign.
Now I remember, for
Let me ask
example,
you
I remember
a different
Privacy,
question.
Yeah,
for example.
like on the IoT Summit. Makes
The
sense.
summit.
Yeah, but funny thing, I was talking with Steve today at lunch, and we organized the IoT Summit in Portugal. For those who are not here, are not Portuguese, and there's a company that Carlo talked and called. It's called ProdSmart, and Gonçalo told me, well, I'm not going. Well, in fact, told Carlo, not me, and I said, what? He's not coming. It's the only IoT Summit, or the only IoT event that happens in Portugal. Why? And I talked with him, and I asked him, Gonçalo, why did you come? And he said, well, who is the people that are on the IoT Summit? And I said, well, developers, IoT startups, some investors. Well, I'm looking for customers. You are not there, so I don't want to participate. Don't take me wrong.
Fair enough.
It's the right answer.
Yeah, it was very
Great
smart.
answer.
He was
Very
telling that
focused.
to me, and I
At least he has the right focus.
Exactly, that's the point I think we are discussing here.
Yeah.
You have to understand what you need and go fetch it, not do pitch competitions if you don't get results from it.
So continuing that same thought, Stephen, what are your thoughts on demo days? And I'll give you the context for that, which is that the Microsoft Accelerator, at least in Seattle, we've stopped doing public demo days. And I mean, it's a big circus, it's a pain in the ass to organize, it costs a lot of money, and we don't actually think it brings the startup city value because the VCs that are actually going to invest in them, we bring them in and it's a closed door meeting and it's going to be a long conversation. It's not the demo day. And to Pedro's point there, we're not getting the customers there either at the demo day. So, what are your thoughts on demo days?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of demo days, and I'll tell you one or two things about them. Is in the past, one of the first accelerators I ran had a demo day, and it was a good finish for the event, but we didn't obsess about the demo day during the program. Like they pitched maybe once a week, right? So we had 10 startups. It was basically 2 hours out of your week. You practice pitching for the last month of the program. A lot of startups, a lot of startup accelerators spend your entire final 3 weeks doing nothing but pitching for demo day. And if you're thinking of applying to an accelerator, avoid those startups like the plague, right? Because you don't want to, because demo day, in the history of demo day, there just hasn't been an investor sitting in the audience saying, oh, I'm going to go invest $1 million into that company. It just never happened, right?
No. There are angels that will sometimes do it that way.
Yeah,
but you're talking about
you guys have
thousands of dollars, not billions of dollars.
You talked about angels and pre-seeders, if you want. Those are probably just believing the person or the team, not the idea, right?
Well,
not that early. I don't know. You tell us. I personally am I would never put my money on a company that is trying to explain.
It's very rare. I mean, I've
what
attended
it's going
several.
to do in 1 minute.
But I mean, I've attended several demo days, and we've invested in companies that have come out of accelerators, but we've never invested, but we've known about the company either when they went in or during the accelerator. We never went to a demo day cold and invested in a company that came out of a demo day.
So you said something interesting. You said some of the early stage guys didn't invest in the person, but not the idea. Are you telling me you'd invest in the idea, not the person? That's a horrible idea.
No. I wouldn't invest in the idea with
Is
a
it the
person
idea?
that I wouldn't believe in. Yeah,
I mean, you can take the person all day long.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
idea they're going to pivot, they're going to grow, they're going to
I
shift.
absolutely agree
We
with
don't
that.
do close to what we started doing when we started. Josh,
Yeah.
Josh could attest. It was a fucking horrible idea, trust me. We were building our own wearable device. It wasn't good, trust me.
99% of the ideas
Yeah.
are horrible anyway. So,
So I think that's all
That's
you're
not an
betting
issue.
on. Yeah, I think that's all you're betting on is that individual, especially at that early of a stage, is you got to figure out, hey, what's their track record? What's it going to look like? When it gets really shitty, because it always does again,
Yeah.
how are they going to respond, and are they going to be rise to it or not? And so the ones that I've seen that are better than most, if their accelerator program is teaching them anything, it's how to go reach out, how to get outside their network, how to go do it for themselves and not wait for it to be handed to you. Because if I look at two startups and one's got a guy who's busting his ass to call everybody, send the emails before the event, making sure that he reached out and made those connections, versus the other guy went, well, where's the investors for demo day?
Right.
I already know who I'm going to bet on, and I don't even care what the idea was. It's just a matter of their behavior.
completely agree.
At one of the accelerators I worked with, we actually kicked out a company before demo day for that behavior. I mean, we were about 10 weeks into the 13-week program, and we asked them to leave, said you're no longer part of the program, because they were already at week 5 or 6, like demanding to see who's going to be at demo day and demanding introductions to them in advance. I'm like, well, you don't understand the concept of demo day. To me, the value of a demo day, of doing it, and behind closed doors is perfectly fine, is actually the video, the recording of the demo day, so that you can send an investor the link as part of your email introduction that you've gotten, and they can at least see, your first pitch to see if they want to bring you in for a larger pitch. That's about the only value you're going to get out of it.
pitch in without the investor actually making the time available to see you.
Yeah, and I'm actually having this debate right now with my partners at with the Vatican and stuff, because they have never done demo days before. So they have and they're like, oh yeah, they just think all the companies, like we ask the companies what their raises are going to be, and they're like, oh yeah, they'll raise it that night. And I'm like, that's not how it's going to work. And they keep telling me that it is, and I keep saying, I'm the subject matter expert. You might want to listen to me.
Never mind.
They keep telling me that it's going to work. So as of today, I just said, let's do it your way, and let's look at the data when it's over.
Have you prayed on it yet?
I have not.
So, in your accelerator, how many IoT companies? We gotta shift this to
What is your what
was the original topic of this thing?
Is it IoT? Oh, sure. Let's talk about IoT.
Some three letters.
All right, let's talk about IoT. Yeah, so we have definitely
at least one.
At least one, and mistakenly I let Pedro mentor them.
There goes another company.
Yeah, exactly. Underperforming for sure. One of the things that they do is they place sensors in the fields of your farm, and then they collect, instrument all the data that comes back, and then takes all the data into the app, and then helps the farmer make a lot of very important decisions. And surprisingly, some of the most important decisions that they're actually making is testing if this particular. So I thought the value as a non-farmer would be, okay, like I'm going to use less water, I'm going to use less fertilizer, and there's part of that. But those kind of optimizations, I think longer term will be important. But what they're finding in the big win in the short term and getting onboarding the customers are determining if I should use this plot for rice and that plot for wheat, or making it up, I don't know the actual crops, right? And making those determinations, or sometimes they'll just take some seeds and put it into like a plot maybe this big, and then get that instrumentation data back. We're instrumenting the earth at this point, right? The soil, the this, the that, and they're seeing where do I get the best yield for these types of seeds? And even if they all grow just wheat, they'll say, well, I get more yield on this side and less yield on that side. And then they know that's where the watering comes in and things like that.
Because it's not simple. You think of it's simple, but you have too many variables on agriculture that you cannot control. So there are a lot of decisions that you
many variables.
Oh, it's because of this, and it's not.
And two quick things about it is by putting the instrumentation, these IoT devices all across the farms. The first is now when they have multiple farmers on their platform, they can aggregate and return data back in aggregate that farmers can look at, which they're finding very valuable. And at first, the farmers would never do this. First of all, what would they do? Like farmers would go to like the town hall and say, well, on rainy days, we do that, so now they actually see the data comes in. Second, which is interesting, is there was like this orchard field. They're actually based in Hawaii. And there was this orchard in Hawaii, and one of those tropical storms came through. And whether it was the humidity or this, all the instrumentation data told them, you should do X. And the farmer was like, no, I'm not going to do X. And the app kept saying, yeah, no, dude, you got to do X. And they did it. and all the other orchards were like wiped out, right? You know, so they, all that data exactly. They're like, well, we're glad we did X. Those are happy customers for sure. Yeah, so there you go. There's an IoT.
He had a question first.
Of those startups that you work with or you know about outside of Portugal, I don't know if you have any in Portugal, but ones outside of Portugal, what is the ratio on technology that they build or use on their projects versus only apps or just software development? What is...
So meaning the percentage of kind of the hardware versus software only?
Yeah. How many of them, how many of those startups have actually some hardware to back up their project or...
I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I'll just say that more and more involves some form of hardware. Where if you asked me that question 5 years ago, it would be an outlier. Oh yeah, we have one startup that has some kind of hardware component.
Last year, when we asked you the question if you invest on IoT, you said what? If I'm not mistaken.
That's not what I said. And I'll still say the same answer I said last year, is I don't invest in IoT. I invest in companies that potentially will invest in any company that uses IoT. Right? So again, like Smart Yield, the company I was talking about in Hawaii, I don't view them as an IoT startup. You asked because we were getting off track talking about Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Web Summit and startup competitions. But I don't consider them an IoT company. I consider them a company that happens to use IoT, but the magic of their company is actually the predictive analytics.
IoT is just a tool set.
Exactly right. IoT is like .NET. IoT is like Ethernet cables, right? Like it's this thing like electricity. I remember when XML first came out, it was like, oh, we're gonna use XML. And like I saw some presenter and he goes, XML is like electricity, right? You build stuff on top of it, and that was 20 years ago. And I've always now thought about that about every new technology. And that's in the accelerator side of in my venture portfolio, in my venture fund, we have a company that has a an IoT device that's about this big, and it slips into an industrial waste bin, and it scans the industrial waste bin and tells the waste management companies when to come pick up the garbage. And it sounds, first of all, it's really boring, but I love boring. And second, it actually saves the waste management companies just millions and millions of dollars.
No need to plan, just...
I mean, as you can imagine, because they would just go and going to bins that weren't there. And it's even more important in rural environments, because driving 45 minutes to a bin, right? And then the bigger the waste management company is, the less control they have over the bins. They don't even have an inventory of how many bins they own.
Yeah.
Right?
We had that case at the with the company in Portugal.
360 Waste.
Yeah.
Efox.
They're off.
So John, let me ask you a question here. Is it a good idea to build your own wearables?
No. The end answer, the short answer is God, no. The longer answer is you learn a hell of a lot of shit doing it the first way, the wrong way, and then to figure out that I'm a big fan of if it's not special, you don't need to do it. You can partner better, and keep the parts that's special where your IP lives, where you can do it better, do those parts better, and find good partners to do it for you. We've had a good experience working with both Microsoft and Samsung on the wearable side, and really where it got interesting for us.
By the way, he's not talking about the Microsoft Band.
No, that's totally different.
We'll put that to bed.
Is that
right
dead?
now? What's that?
Is the band dead?
I have no idea.
Yeah. No,
I have no idea.
As far as I know, it's
was it ever alive?
I had one.
Can I buy one today?
No.
I walk into a Microsoft.
No, I'm sure you can find one on eBay.
Yeah.
Find a lot of shit on eBay.
But
within that rarity
I can find it
similar to what you were
next to
saying,
the grandfather clock.
is at the end of the day, it really comes down to what's that end use case. And that's what the value. Same thing, we do a lot of stuff around data analytics, and what's data worth? Dick, if you don't do anything with it. If it sits there, it's a cost. Sitting in a data center, filling it up is a cost. The only value it has is what problem can you use it to solve, what's the ROI on that problem, and then it becomes worth either a lot or very little if you don't do it. And the other answer too is, we just need more data. Okay, so if there's only a part of it that's valuable, you've got a needle in a haystack, and putting more hay on top of it is not going to help you make that be valuable.
Oh, yeah, it's going to help you. Yeah.
So yeah, we should collect everything and store it all right here. So how's that work? What's the
And
good
then really,
part?
really slow queries.
Yeah. And so
I just want to make sure it's harder to find the
I'm
middle.
just a big fan of finding out what's the pain point, what's the problem you're solving, what's the use case, and what's the ROI to that, and then what's the most efficient way to get to that to get the end result so you actually drive value.
John, you're close to healthcare, so you guys usually have a lot of regulation issues because medical devices are not just some devices, right? Or do you guys have something in Europe? Because I believe there's
I was about to ask that. Yeah,
A
if
lot
I
of
wanted to
differences.
buy your wearable, could I?
a
And
lot of
use it
difference
here.
between the European regulations
Till March,
regarding
yes.
medical devices and the American way of regulating
So,
American
yeah.
medical
So the
devices.
short answer is we're expanding here in the middle of next year. The longer answer is we're not a medical grade device, and in the United States we're not. We do health and wellness. And what we do, because we're not a medical grade device, we can't diagnose an issue, but we can provide the data sets to a physician who's able to use that data to then make a diagnosis. So we can say when you're at risk, we can say when there's increased things, we have a dynamic baseline for each individual patient, and when their degree of change comes off the baseline, we can then say this patient is now outside their normal parameters. We can say that all day long. I can't say that they have a urinary tract infection or that they have
And
X,
so,
Y, and Z condition.
so in Europe, you'll try to keep out of being a medical device.
Yeah. Well, we don't. Again, I don't make a device.
But
So
it's-
I
it's-
just sit on Samsung.
He started off making a device, and like
Now he got smarter,
Me
and
and
it's
his,
not
and
longer-
the
it's
original.
no
But you
longer
guys
making a
are
device.
allowed to store
Yeah.
the data wherever you're storing it? Or you have to
everything
actually have
we-
servers in each country? Because I know for a fact, like here in Portugal, for you to bring my medical data,
Yeah, we'd have to store your medical data here in Portugal.
Yeah.
So in the EU, we have to
Whoa.
pick which country it is, or the bulk.
You have
In the
to
United
be
States, we
very
can store it
picky.
wherever we like. All of our stuff is built to be HIPAA compliant though, and Health Trust certified. So everything we do, from the Samsung wearable that's NOx certified to the Azure cloud, which we love, which is wonderfully secure, and then our other partners at Teradata. So everything we've done is really built it that way. And also the other thing we do is we're very upfront with the end user. Thank you. What's in terms of use, the privacy policies, what we do, and how we do that. We start being really upfront with our users and say, look, we're going to use this information for these things. Here's what we're asking you for your permission to do it. And part of it is, yes, we're going to sell some of that information. We're using it for, along with things of, if we get 1,000 people on the platform, we can look at heart disease and say, okay, these 10 people had a heart attack.
Yeah.
What happened before they had the heart attack? And we have that data. We're absolutely going to use and capitalize that. And we're very clear about it in the beginning, which most users, I haven't seen me said, we'd like more old people to have heart attacks. So no.
And then, yeah, and if you try to actually pay the users for that information, I'm going to poke you real hard now.
So the fun part is the users are paying him to give him the data.
I know, that's not the fun. I know, that's a business model that still runs, but maybe it won't run in the future.
Well, the key of that is though, is if you provide enough value on the front side to the consumer.
that'll do it.
So what we do is we provide a 911 service instead of the fall pendant that people used to have. I fall and I can't get up. We've built it into a wearable device that tells that not only can the individual senior call for help when they need it, they can also share that information back with their loved ones, so they can look and see, how's mom aging today? How is she? How is her heart rate? How is her activity levels? Is she outside of a normal thing she does? So I can solve that problem as an adult child of knowing that my mom's taken care of okay, or that she's in a safe place. For mom, she can be more independent. That's the value that we give to them. And in return, we get the data that we're able to drive that we then share with their healthcare system to help get to better outcomes for them, to try and get with the lowest cost or the lowest acuity.
So there's still the problem of distributing data in the house.
There's no way around it, especially now in Europe with GDPR. This is going to be, I don't know, I'll risk it 20 times worse.
Trump will fix it.
Nigel Farage will fix it.
Trump will fix it.
He's really gonna really.
He'll be
huge.
He'll be huge.
Guys, sorry,
I know you guys have this very recent experience with having someone like Trump running the place, but you know, we Europeans are
You guys have a lot of experience.
yeah, we had a lot of experience having assholes running the place, so we kind of brought some immunization to that.
You know, the GDP stuff real quickly, because GDPR, sorry. That is one of those, as a end consumer, I love it and I'm frustrated by it because it is going to strangle innovation.
Yeah.
However, I'll be honest, I'm a machine learning fanatic. I love what I can do with it, but I've also realized it's nuclear powered. Like there's a lot of stuff we can do with it. I mean, if you start monitoring just like purchases that people are making,
anonymous data sets.
Yeah. Anyways, it's
guys,
fine.
sorry, I need your help. I'm telling you why. Because I was talking to my wife, Paula, and the thing is, and what about tomorrow? What line of code, what thing did I make to change Portugal? Because, sorry, I'm in Portugal, and you are here. So we had a big thing that was fires, and many people died, and like firemen all over the place. We don't have the infrastructures. So we thought about developers are like Spider-Man, right? They have great power, so if they are, usually they like to give. So we thought about the community, a makers community and developers community, to develop a kind of product to go and help fixing some of these issues. What your thought about, because we are talking about startups, we are talking all about making money. Making money is not bad, it's good. But the thing is, how do you see community in changing something? Like addressing real problems, get crowds, and do something for society. Because we are talking here about politics, right? Usually politics in Portugal doesn't help. It just takes your taxes and doesn't do anything else. How do you see a thing like crowdsourcing about solving an issue?
You should ask actually a little different question. Ask Steve what's the main team of his accelerator that he's running in Vatican.
Okay, cool. If this helps, sure. But the thing is, how do you see crowdsourcing and developers, guys that are not business oriented, they are not startup oriented, they are just great guys who want to be involved in the project in a small amount.
So one of the things we did in the States is we organized these things called Give Camps. And Give Camps, what it was is we bring in a bunch of nonprofits and we would bring in a bunch of developers for a weekend, and we would go build out software for them. And oftentimes, I mean, it was small things like, in fact, I'll be honest, the most successful ones were when we didn't take on an ambitious project. It was when we brought in a company, a nonprofit that there was one that does a lot of education for little kids, and they're particularly working with special needs kids, and they needed a fundraising website.
Mm-hmm. And people just coded the damn website and that's it?
All we did was we put together a WordPress site. We found a designer to put a nice skin on it, and then we hooked that up to PayPal's fundraising stuff. And we brought in, I don't know, 6 people for a weekend and built that, and it's successful. Turned it on, and the beautiful part about running it as a CMS, WordPress, was we gave them a half-day tutorial on how to edit WordPress.
So
that was incredibly impactful because because what I saw with the more aggressive projects was people would come in and they'd get real excited about the one weekend, and then they'd burn out very quickly because they were not. It wasn't necessarily benefiting them directly, or they couldn't see the benefit to them directly. Or even if they could, it's still above and beyond, and it's extra, and it's time away from their family, it's time away from their kids, which they can give in a sprint. Like community leaders, like Pedro, give it up every evening, every night of every month, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Or do you give it up on a schedule where it's a couple of days a month?
It has to be X amount of days, and
exactly.
you have to commit with them.
Right.
It's not sustainable otherwise.
Yeah. So it's not sustainable to have a big aggressive project that is community funded. You need to have something that's a little more, So the most successful open source projects that I see have a corporate champion who's actually paying for a lot of the development. Right. You kind of go down the list, and it's I'm a big open source fanatic, and I love it, but I also am very realistic that it doesn't happen by magic.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening on IoT space? Because one thing is to develop software that is, as you can say, like 2 days, and you can give 2 days easily.
Yes.
But in IoT you have to have a lot more.
So in IoT scenarios, it depends again on what you're trying to get done. So, is it possible to slap together a Raspberry Pi and a handful of sensors and get what you need done, or do you need to go to actual shipping off and having PCBs made, and that is just not going to happen in a community funded thing. But you could get a hobbyist thing off the ground.
Yeah,
right?
it's
MQTT
kind of
is
makers,
open
yeah,
source.
Yeah. Well, so but a maker thing that can happen in a couple of days, sure. I would struggle to see if we could do that over the course of a long extended period of time. One of the most successful, similar to that, okay, was in Japan after the big.
This radiation stuff?
Yeah.
Fukushima.
So the Fukushima meltdown, right? You know, they had a
Yeah.
nuclear reactor meltdown. There was a lady, Linda. I can't remember her starts with an L. Anyways, she started out. She looked at it and was like, "How can I help?" Okay, and she actually built an open source hardware for a mobile Geiger counter. And you can go buy the kit for your own mobile Geiger counter for about $600 US dollars. Okay, thank you so much. And then you can put that on the back of your car. And as you're driving along the highways, it is calling home and reporting what the radiation is at various GPS coordinates around the island of Japan. Now, the thing is, she had a corporate backer for that. She had a full-time paycheck. She pitched the idea, and it got listed under the philanthropy department of that corporate backer.
Yeah. That's why you need scale.
And so now that it's out there, the community has taken that, and I can go buy the kit and put it together in a half day with the instructions, put it in my car, and that's cool, and I feel good, and I spent $600 to do it. Okay. But it's not a sustained effort over time. I mean, I'm sorry I'm putting a downer on all that, but you know, it's
Realistic.
I'm being realistic, and you know, and part of the reason I'm being realistic is some of the biggest disappointments in my life came from Give Camp. I mean, some of the biggest joys of my life, but also some of the biggest disappointments when we took on and we made promises that we could not keep. And so, you know, when we're talking about a charity and they place their hope and their faith in you, and you can't keep that, that hurts, right? However, we helped a ton of people and a ton of nonprofits through Give Camp, and it's a fantastic program. But we in the first year we let down a lot of people. Second year we scoped everything to what can we get done in a weekend.
As a side note, there's in America another cool program that you can follow on that. It's called Code for America. I don't know if you know it, but it more or less offers a similar...
Code for America first, or just Code for America?
Code for America.
It depends if you're a Republican.
Make code great again.
Yeah, make code great again.
I actually have a T-shirt that says
That's
"Make
a good
dot
one.
great again."
Well, some of you know that I
still
work,
get the teller
I work
shirts.
at Microsoft, but I'm also Portuguese and European. And every time I open Bing, not now because now it's working correctly, but Bing Maps,
Wait,
always
you
show
don't
the
work at
center of the
Microsoft
US
anymore,
as the place where you were.
Yeah.
And it bored me to death.
Yeah.
wait, you stopped working at Microsoft and you still use Bing? Mind control hasn't worn off yet.
No, but
No, it takes a little while for the implant.
the key point is about Code of America to get to
Works as well.
the point
Yeah,
and then get to IoT again. The Code for America is a very good initiative on this. People join in and participate in smaller events like Josh was telling and solve small problems each time. So I think it makes sense. And the good part of Code for America, they have like a platform where people can give money to, or corporations, and then they use it to develop more time but paid development. So that supports the initiative.
Yep.
Getting back to, you're going to ask about IoT?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Changing my rapidly changing question.
No. I had that in the buffer already.
That'll be IoT.
What about low power device and machine learning? Do you see already some effort to try to treat the data locally? Because when you have sensor all over the world, maybe it's an interesting problem to try to not to have to send all the data.
Define low power, because you know when I think IoT, I'm thinking low power. I'm thinking runs on a small cell battery for 3 years.
Yeah,
that's low power.
That's low power. Yeah. I give you a concrete.
But when you talk about machine learning on the edge, you know one of the first scenarios that I think of is when I'm driving an autonomous vehicle, I don't want to do a round trip to the cloud to decide if I'm going to miss the bunny in the road.
Yep.
Right. So
You drive autonomous vehicles.
when I'm driving in,
Riding
riding in. You're right. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. English.
I'm sure you hit the, gas pedal on your electric car.
So that's not a low power device.
No, this
right.
is not.
I mean that's a full on high power
No,
PC.
that's a high octane device actually.
But we are doing a ton of stuff where we are, we're running machine learning models on something as low power as a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lower than that, but I also question whether you need to or not. Right. So you think about your farmers' fields, right? You've got all the little devices that are the sensors and whatnot, and they're reporting into a home base. And if you need to make a decision, you can make a decision at the gateway point.
Sure.
But that's a medium device. That's a Raspberry Pi or higher. That's not the.
But I'll give you another example, because in my case, I'm working with those racks where the bottle for gases are kept. And I'm basically using the vibration that the bottle are making to decide if they are empty or full, to decide if they are put or taken, or if they are also and which position they are taken from. So I would need quite a significant computing power to decide that, I think. So I probably have two ways to do that. So maybe I pre-process the data and just sending the bit that are enough to be cloud computed, or maybe I can afford to do that locally.
So, running a model doesn't actually take a tremendous amount of power.
Yeah.
Training a model does.
Okay, so I can, yeah. Okay.
And then the secondary thing that we're doing quite a bit of, and this is all part of the edge computing movement, et cetera, is we're doing a hierarchical model. So, think about, you're walking along in the dark and somebody steps around the corner and you jump, right? And then you recognize them, right? That jump, that very, very low powered type of thing, we can put that type of a model in very low powered devices, and that can make a snap decision, but we need that for as close to real time as possible. For everything else, what kind of lag do you need? Yeah. So but ML on the edge is absolutely a thing, and that is going to be a huge point of what we're doing going forward.
Cool.
Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. You don't use the same algorithms that you use on the cloud, on the devices. You change them a little bit, make them simpler.
Yeah. So and by making it simpler, what we're doing is we're actually pruning and compressing, and so we're losing degrees of fidelity, right? So think about when I your degrees of fidelity on a
pixelating
it's like pixelating an image, right? You can get the idea from the pixelated image, but when I've got my big 1080p, it better not be fucking pixelated, right? And I know you guys are doing a bunch of machine learning like on the watch.
Yeah, so for us it's always a constant battle of output versus power consumption. So we do a lot of, we built a data service that runs on the watch itself, and then a lot of what we do to balance that power consumption is figure out what do we need to do locally that's actually vitally important. What pieces do we need to send, and how limited can we send to the cloud to get the information we need? And then we also structure it so we can fill in those gaps after that, so when the wearable charges, we actually then go ahead and push larger packets out. So it allows us to stretch the life of the battery of the watch much longer to get a better output, but it allows for the performance we need, because we're pulling off, a lot of readings in multiple, every second to understand how the person's moving, what their behavior patterns are, and all those things. But it doesn't all have to go right then.
So you do a kind of trade-off between accuracy and availability of data.
And then we fill the gaps in later. So we paint enough of a picture to get the information we need in the spot, and then we go back through when we have access to more power to take and balance that out differently. And we have IP around that.
And you get the added bonus though of low bandwidth environments.
Yep.
You're limited, but you also have some functionality and responsiveness.
Yep.
Your device works a little bit like a mobile phone, where it has enough battery for a day, or it's like a storage device where you can use it a couple of weeks, and every now and then you have to charge it.
God, I wish. No, we're on the so right now we get about 27 hours off of a Gear S2. We get about 36 off of Gear S3. We're looking at close to 4 days off the next iteration of the watch, and it's always
like a little bit like a mobile.
yeah, and it's always that balance. And also, if you can't get a signal, it starts chewing through battery pretty quick. So we have to have algorithms that throttle it back when it doesn't need to. How do we store locally, and then understand what to do with that?
Your device works independently, or do you need a phone to be the carrier for
Independently.
the...
So everything, they're all LT enabled. So everything goes directly to the cloud. We push out data every 15 minutes, and then the rest of it we spot check when we want to and how we want to.
How do you solve accessibility for that? Because you're talking about keeping the grandma safe and all that stuff, and usually, because we have another problem in Portugal, that is we are aging too fast,
Yep.
and there's no family like taking care of
That's not unique to Portugal. It's across the
it's
globe.
kind of Europe, so. But the thing is, you have to have adaptive design, so because you to charge something or to take it out of the wrist or something like that, someone that, how,
So we completely rebuilt the
we
completely rebuilt the UI to make it a simplified user interface to make it more friendly for seniors. That's one thing we spent a year building out. We spent over 300 hours living in senior communities to understand what they wanted, how they wanted it, what would they actually use and wouldn't use. And so it's really hard to make something simple. And that's what we spent a ton of time on, taking the traditional interface, overriding the watch, making it so that that could be done. Seniors don't dislike technology. That's a misnomer. They dislike complexity. So if you can deliver an easy-to-use use case for them in a simple fashion, they'll use it all day long. We also had to take a look at things like the charging cradle. Is one of the reasons why we use it when we do. There's no cords to plug in. It's just a magnet. You drop it on and pull it right off. It's induction, so it makes it simpler. We went through a redesign of the watch band that we deliver to seniors based on the feedback that we've gotten from especially people with rheumatoid arthritis. It's much more difficult for them or Parkinson's to put the watch on and off. So those are all considerations that we built into it as we went through the process. I'm a master fan of design learning and user-centric design, and so realizing, understanding that what might be neat to us or to our engineers, my opinion doesn't mean shit. It's the people who are going to use it. That's what really matters. And so, yeah, again, I don't do anything but type and talk. So,
Hey, are we actually streaming now?
Yes. We
Yay!
are finally streaming.
Woohoo!
Okay, do you want to do a small break because food is there?
So let's take a break. Now that we're streaming.
Let's stop streaming.
Now, the audience is going to take a break. The panel may go on as we started.
But
Okay, like 10 minutes break, but you can ask, of course, we are here.
No, it's time for the beer.
And it's the first time I see him drinking a Coke.
right? Right?
Are you feeling okay?
I know. It's the
Thank you.
The environment.
Boss, you were supposed to come up with the panel too, but whatever.
Yeah, of course. It's customary. People exchange like me.
Hello.
Hey, John, nice to see you, buddy. Everything fine?
Everything's good. Everything's good. Yeah, you do this.
You can throw it out the window if you like. Yeah, you can leave it, leave it, just take it. Whatever you do. I can vouch for the... There's a stripper bar. No, no kidding. What? I mean, yeah, I'm offended. Don't tell me. There's there's we're going back to the double deck. So, and it's doing more than there's a party going on just around the corner. It's constantly collecting all its overhead. So if you actually turn on all of the sensors on it at all times, you'll probably get 18 hours. So you're trying to balance 18 hours in 3 days. It's like a plenty nice. About 20 cents, not bad. So you got stills and 12 hours of rough drinking time. Oh, he's a lot smarter. And then I'll take a nap. All right. Yeah. I got an 8 hour. Perfect time to get some sleep. It's Chris, by the way. I'm John. Nice to meet you. Matthew.
Non puede. Tá bom. É confortável. Só ficar um pouquinho mareado. Só um bocadinho.
We just need to make sure that this is a habit that every year that we do this, we just randomly bring somebody in halfway through and just to throw off it.
I like that.
Yeah.
We should have like kept that girl's Twitter handle or something. You tweeted her like, can't make it? Can't make it? Just ask questions over Twitter. We can actually replace Pager with a bot. Think about it. Everyone can send their questions to an address, AI algorithm, goes through it, and the bot manifests to us.
Well, I can get one of my padres over there to whip it up.
I think they showed that done by the end of the session. We'll call it the moderator bot. Or I'll get one more of those little chocolate balls.
Are those good? Oh, those are great.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll get a chocolate ball.
No. Steven, bring the plate. bring the plate. So Pedro, have you heard of cats before? Herding cats? That's easier.
He's a man. I know him like since 2008.
Why do you think that happened? I just want to run in your lap. Thanks, sir. You're a gentleman and scholar.
Try.
Love you.
Okay, so
bitterballing.
Bitterballing, yeah, very good.
Can we?
I thought they were bitterballing. They have bitterballing here. My favorite Dutch fake food. Not in free now.
Oh. We're down to you guys.
Can we continue?
We lost some people.
We lost like half.
It's evidently we're not that interesting.
We got audience bot too.
And we had beer.
That was the problem.
Okay.
Bitterballing.
And the question is for Steve.
I'm listening.
The question is for you.
You said you got the
He was CTO Teller for a long time.
Okay, swag.
Fresco Ventures is hey, I like you too. I will answer your questions.
And he is was an R&D for Microsoft.
He was a beer.
And it's for all the perspectives and all the stuff.
I don't know where I met you before, Steve.
Dude, it was at the banana bar.
Oh, the banana, you know the banana bar? Don't take the last bite. Advice number one.
More than once.
So,
Wow.
the question is for Steve.
Wait, whoa. You gave everyone chocolate.
Sorry.
Goes well with banana.
Pedro, Duncan has replicated,
Wait,
so you
the
must
banana bar is live streaming?
now you must introduce Duncan number 2.
Yeah.
So, go ahead and introduce
I brought a British
because
guy
I
to
just
banana
met
bar.
you.
We got kicked out for fighting with British guys.
That's awesome. I'm
So, boss, who are you?
I'm Bas Woutersen. I'm the CTO of a small company in the Netherlands.
How many small companies?
We actually have 4 to 5 companies.
Don't worry, that's for the streaming only.
That's for the streaming only? Okay, so I can...
They get to hear you better.
Okay, so is the audio that I
You're good.
go crazy?
Bit of all
Yeah, exactly. So I own 4 small companies, and I'm just opening the 5th one.
He doesn't like himself very much.
Yeah, but it's tiny.
Are some of them competitors with each other?
No, luckily not.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually a good idea. I thought about that.
Leave it out. That's how you decide.
The bite from him, then I don't like it.
He's a personal PC.
Yeah. And yeah, what we do is actually we're 4 friends, and we made our own company just and reinvest the money that we earn on contracting. We reuse that and reinvest that money in our other smaller companies, and we use freelancers for specific purposes. It makes no sense to me, for instance, becoming a 3D artist up here. It makes no sense. You can hire them for a few months and then do your stuff, and then that's why we have maybe 5 of them, and we do that for a few months, and then we finish a project and we go on to the next project, or maybe even build our own products, or build a product together with a company that needs a solution for a problem. And we like to use new technology to solve business problems or improve business processes even, and do stuff like with HoloLenses and see cable underneath the floor. Cables underneath the floor is funny. It's been used for inside for a long time now, but the outside world, to me, makes a lot more sense to have the HoloLens, because you see so much more stuff. We're combining it with a lot of sensors. We click on visors. We use it in the dark, or in the light, so it's darker. Those sorts of things. That's basically what we do.
Just one question for me to understand. You do different startups?
Yeah.
And who's managing the last ones that you are not doing now? Like you have 4, the first one, who's managing? Is it still you? Or they're still the same CEO?
It's still the same CEO and the CTO. I'm the CEO of 2 and the CTO of another 2. And so we're with 4 friends. We mix and match for what the best products and projects are actually that we want to do. Like the HoloLens project is mainly me and the robotics guy, and that's why we did a little extra startup thing.
Boss, you didn't convince the chocolate's already gone. Next
Yeah,
week will be the beer,
chocolates
so
are gone.
you gotta up your game.
Yeah. Get on that.
That's a shame.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for Steve, because
What about boss? Are you?
Sorry.
is the VC
Testing. 1, 2, 3. I have a question for Pedro.
We're now actually live streaming, and we can do
Well,
golf swings.
I'm not sure it's a VC. I mean, is in Vatican City. It's probably an angel only.
That was good. That was a 10 out of 10, actually. That was a 10 out of 10.
That's the second tonight.
Yeah.
You owe me now.
Ricardo.
You don't-
Ricardo Claus.
you don't know, but your wife is tagged on the live streaming.
It's awesome.
So
I
go
guarantee
ahead.
she's not
Go ahead.
watching.
Okay.
100%
The
chance.
question is, last year I did the same question.
Sure.
If you had to invest on IoT or in companies that work
Can
with
I just
IoT,
explain 2 IoT companies in my portfolio?
yes, I know. Which kind of industries do you choose? And then I will try to move it on. to
Waste
others.
management and agriculture. Yes. Waste management and agriculture.
Why?
Answer
Because
validated.
I have invested in companies in that space and they're doing quite well.
I guess the answer right now, we have the
We
chocolate
have a lot of
plant.
balls here.
We got a lot of balls. So
Because last year, if you recall, you answered that everything where you get your hands dirty, all the industries that people don't want to touch.
Boring industries.
Exactly.
Right. So industrial IoT is pretty cool.
Exactly. Industry makes the only, to me as well, industry makes the only sense, which we tried doing it at home. It makes no sense yet.
That's for Apple and Samsung and Google and Amazon.
Yeah, except if you're using it via the wearables. The wearables make sense again. For the elderly in hospitals, for instance, I can really see that. It adds value to it. But once again, actually, you're using it at home in a hospital environment. So it's also it's still industry actually.
Yeah, it's still industry.
For the agriculture, it makes a lot of sense because even for your wood fires that you're having in Portugal, if you would spread out a shitload of sensors, you could actually get all the data and know beforehand where the fires would actually start. Because you know the temperature, you know the humidity, all those sorts of things. You can spread them out very easily.
Yeah, but we would have to fire.
You would only need one kind of sensor in Portugal, is detecting gasoline in the air, because most of the fires are...
No, it's not true.
No.
Bess, do you not join the program?
The
initiative?
They're not expensive and they're not that hard to make.
No. We would have to fire a lot of people that actually do nothing. But as we don't have the sensors, they kind of get away with it. But if we had the sensors, they would have to go.
So what you are saying is everything that is not a consumer market, that all the big firms are looking at and saying, this is very good, it's a good way to do it. Like industry is a good way because there are not so much of the bigger companies looking at it.
Also, but the consumer market's really hard because if you want to change your light bulbs, for instance, you have to change, now you have a lot of times, you have to change all your wiring and stuff, and you have to move Wi-Fi channel, you have to make mesh networks here. It's far too complicated for the people that are at home, just even they don't want to have 3 remote controls for all the devices in their home. You want to give them 22 more just for all the IoT devices in their house? It makes no sense.
Yeah, especially the value delivered, right? Yeah. The value delivered is quite low compared to industry.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time looking at smart home solutions, and we used to do gesture control for smart home solutions and everything else, and the bottom line is, there's just not a good use case. If the bottom line is I can get off my ass and flip the light switch, and it's going to cost me $900 to change that, they're not going to do it. So, I mean, it comes down to, we focus on enterprise applications, even though it's healthcare, in an individual level, but there's still an enterprise backend that drives the consumption that makes sense to actually have the product work that way. Otherwise, there's not a good enough value prop for an individual. There's always going to be people who want it and want to play with it as a toy.
Yeah.
But to get it to start really starting to matter, either the cost has to come massively down, which only comes from scale, which is going to come from an enterprise, than any other way.
Well, I put one caveat on that, and that is that if you have a deep enough niche, so it's a specialty niche, and you're adding value in that small niche. But
how do you do that at scale? I mean, that's the problem. It's a niche, by nature, it's not scale.
So then the question is, really at that point in time, you're not trying to build that next $1 billion company. You're trying to build an acquisition, right?
That's fair.
But that is a deep niche. What's that?
Well, that's not the reason to build a company.
Right.
Right. So you built I call those PNCs, products, not companies.
Yes.
Right. And I find that a lot in hardware and IoT space. Right.
Yep.
Someone I meet and I'm like, okay, you got a product, not a company.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just.
So the exit strategy is the exit.
Yeah, but I would actually build a different type of business model where so build a lifestyle business instead of an exit, because you'll be very disappointed with the exit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with lifestyle business.
Absolutely nothing wrong. I wish I had one.
Right.
Let me come speak at conferences.
Let me ask you guys. Let me ask you all on the cover that you're saying that industrial IoT makes more sense because
now.
But
the home is
isn't that because industries actually know their costs, know their running costs? So as soon as you have something that lowers costs, they immediately have the money to support going in that direction and do experiments or adopting new ways of doing stuff, getting a bunch of sensors inside.
Do you think every big company has a good handle on their costs?
Well,
have you ever looked at banks?
Banks, I don't see banks as an industry. I was thinking about real hardware industry stuff,
So
actual manufacturing plants.
There are some companies that have a good handle on specific types of costs. So did I put enough qualifications on that?
Yeah.
So airlines, for example, will have a really crisp understanding of how much they're spending on fuel a year. They don't necessarily know everything.
Anytime on being stationed in airports because they are.
Yeah. Anytime the meter is running, they understand that. But there's a ton of lost money in any type of a large company.
Electric consumption for their website.
Yeah, electric consumption for their website.
E-commerce fees from the bank. Like, they probably have no idea.
No, they have no idea. But if you can save them 1% on fuel costs for their airplanes, if you can save 1% on your fuel for your car, how much would you be willing to pay for that per year?
Shit.
Nothing.
Right.
Yeah, well, you're an asshole. So,
Its point is that 1% on my fuel expenses will probably be completely ruined by some damn oil market fluctuation.
Well, there's that too. But if you could save 1% on your fuel costs for the year, now if I can save an airline 1%,
that's a lot of money.
Now all of a sudden we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they're willing to pay for that. And so industrial IoT makes a ton more sense because you can prove out that value very easily to somebody if you can show them here's what you're what you're paying now, here's what you're going to be paying after, and here where we're charging you a percentage of that. It doesn't mean that it's not valuable in the consumer scenario. It just means that it is much harder to prove to enough individuals that it is going to be worth it to actually get back your investment.
It's valuable, but it's not economically valuable.
What is about cross-selling? Because what I'm seeing here now is that, for instance, like insurance companies, if you have a lifestyle that is correct, or if you drive your car in a safety way, they will drop the insurance price. So how do you see this trade or this cross-selling about IoT, personal data, blah blah, all this kind of stuff? It's a new business. It's a way to empower business.
John, do you have an idea?
Yeah. So, I think it depends on the insurance company and how sophisticated they are. Well, there's some that are phenomenal, and there's others that are shocking how archaic they are. I can only speak for the United States where we do most of our work, and then you get, depending on which insurance vertical. Auto is much simpler than life versus healthcare.
In Portugal we have life because if you are running and you have a bracelet, then the life insurance drops. Sorry.
Okay.
Just an example.
Yeah, so it's for us it really depends again on how sophisticated the organization is, what value they place on data, how they can understand how it can impact and have ROI for them at the end of the day. So us as a smaller company, we hunt the ones that care. It's very simple to pass on the ones that don't understand. I can spend a lot of energy and effort trying to convince somebody of something, or I can go down the street and find the company that's smarter, that listens to what we have to say, and all we have to do is move the needle a little for them, and then now you're doing things at scale that makes a difference. And then you can go back and get the other ones later. It's all about where do you put your time in, where do you put your effort in, and how do you do it. So to answer your question though is, everybody thinks they want data, but everybody's terrified to house it. And everybody's terrified to have especially personalized data. And they all think that hey, we'd be a great use case, but we don't want to touch it. And so somebody has to step up and take it. Somebody has to step up and be ownership for it and handle it properly. And then you can start getting some of the use cases out of it and then share that with those providers. Also, what we've seen, especially in the United States in the healthcare business, very few of them want to share with anyone else. And so if I'm United Health Group, there's no way I'm going to give Anthem any of our information. And so, not only, so that it starts to become more and more siloed. So it's just difficult. You have to come up with a way to pull the information in aggregate outside of a payer and then being able to repurpose it back in.
Well, my question is about adoption, because Joshua said, I will not buy that shit. Sorry. If I'm not getting enough from it because it's my car full consumption, but I can get some other value in the fringes. And
So going back to his point, it depends on how sophisticated the company is, right? So back when I was in the States, before I moved to Ireland, I worked with a bunch of different insurance companies. And there were two of them. For some reason, Ohio is the insurance company state. I don't understand why. But there's
legal substance.
You know, there's one that's, you know, they're 90 minutes apart on the freeway, and one of them, I'm not gonna name names, but one of them would be a little more progressive, and the other one is kind of stuck in the same state all the time.
Lots of farms.
Yeah. So, anyways, one of them considered IT a cost center, and so they were constantly trying to reduce the costs, right, and cost of IT. And
20th century.
And so the other one was they considered themselves a technology company that funded themselves by selling insurance. And at least that was the CTO's position on this, right? And he ran his crew like that, and I thought that was really an interesting thing. And they were the first ones to ship out the little dongles that you stick in the car, and it tells you how you're driving. It's a horribly inaccurate model, but sure, right? You know, it's a step in the right direction. You know, but you know, that actually goes back to, that is actually an industrial IT solution, because the consumer is actually not the one that is purchasing it.
The insurance company is supplying that.
Yeah, the industry is buying it.
And the other piece of that too is there's a magic balance between, as a consumer, if I gave it to you and I paid you $1, would you do it? No. If I paid you $1 million, would you do it? Absolutely. Okay, somewhere in the middle of that spectrum is a sweet spot that works, and everybody's a little bit different to tweak, so you've got to take a look and say, okay, what's the cheapest I can pay to get the largest shift in the population to do it, to get the most ROI back for the technology that's been put in.
For that sweet spot,
on Wednesday. Because Thursday's totally different model, but that's the key to it all.
But it comes down to the use cases. If you're doing an IoT startup and you want to target the home and the consumer, there's like 20 use cases. Turn on and off the lights, turn on and off the sprinklers, open the door. I mean, like,
it's the same use
all right, there's
case.
5 use cases, right? And industrial IoT, there are an infinite number of use cases and at scale, right? So that's why industrial IoT is far more exciting than consumer IoT, because your traditional kind of consumer electronics companies are going to be the ones dominating, you know, consumer IoT, right? I saw, you know, Hackcelerator, you saw Duncan here last year, right? You know, so I partnered up with them, Hackcelerator, since the beginning. And I'm trying to remember, we were talking about this at lunch, you know, there was a guy that basically built Alexa 5 years ago. Guess what? Amazon owns Alexa. I mean, like, you know, he's still dinking around with his little Alexa competitor now, but like 5 years ago he was building it. And there were actually like 2 or 3 others I ran into, and the technology was great, but it was, you know, they were too early because it was bleeding edge, and then the companies that already own those customers, like it's so easy for Amazon to go push the Amazon Alexa out, or Apple, Google, because they already own you for your other consumer electronic devices, where Alexa's never going to go sell, you know, a solution to the airlines to measure this, or the farms and all that other kind of stuff. So the industrial IoT is a wide open, huge opportunity. That's why it's so exciting.
Yep. Yeah, the only plausible competitors to Alexa would be, you know, other large, you know, known
other tech giants.
Well, Harman and some of the others that are actually making actual hardware.
Is it Belinda? Bertha. Is that Microsoft's? Microsoft always has horrible names for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a horrible name. But you know, they're actually partnering with Harman on one of them, and Harman's actually an incredible name. Right. Yeah.
What's the name for the Google Assistant? You don't tell.
Third place.
It's even worse.
It used to be, hey, go.
Might be one of the best one I've heard.
Third place, so hey,
so that's the line they paid you actually to come here, right? Just to say this.
A lot of different products. Okay, my 2-year-old daughter, her first complete sentence was, "Alexa, play Elmo."
Nice.
Really? Yeah, that was her first complete sentence.
Nice.
And also, like, I have to admit this now, now that I brought up children, is my crowning achievement as a parent. I go, "Natasha, what does a cow say?" She says, "Moo." You know, I go through all the animals and I go, "What does Darth Vader say?" And she goes, That is my crowning achievement as a father. And I have Darth Vader flip-flops, and she looks at him and she goes, "That's great."
That's awesome.
I know, it really is.
Well, all right. So I will tell one, and then we'll move back to IoT.
Move back to IoT.
So
but Darth Vader's like walking IoT.
You're responsible for bringing us back to IoT in just a minute, okay? But I've got one very, very short story. My daughter was 8 years old. She's now 17. But we're sitting there at breakfast, and she's got some bacon on the end of her fork. And she's just sitting there looking at him. I said, "What's up, Boo?" She says, "Bacon is proof that there is a God and he loves us." I was like, raising her right.
You've done something correct.
Yes.
Okay,
So bring us back to IoT.
Back to let's
At least that was about Darth Vader. He's like a walking IoT.
Yeah. You know,
He's very instrumental.
You're true. I'm the one who went way off.
You went. So
Right,
let's
right.
talk about Darth Vader. Like, what are the IoT sensors that
It
Darth
has a
Vader
lot
need?
of wearables.
Oxygen, a lot of wearables.
Wearables.
Oxygen sensor. What are the sensors Darth Vader has?
He's also completely committed.
All in. He is all in. Like not just like a Fitbit. Like
No,
he is.
he's
all
like, I'm
in.
in. Like, I
The
really hope
audience
this works
does
well.
not share your optimistic view.
And he's unfettered. That's also.
So back to
That's true.
back to
Good
IoT. Let's concentrate on the T.
Darth Vader. is
T.
IoT.
The T stands for things. We have a tendency to think about material, tangible things, but things don't have to be tangible, do they? I mean, autonomous agents, artificial neural networks, aren't those things?
No.
Won't they be able to share an economy of their own?
Sure.
Let's
It-
bring this into machine-to-machine economy and make the things a bit more wide.
I think a generally accepted definition of IoT is this: any type of device or sensor is probably the better word, a sensor that will measure something and report it back.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So if you can have a virtual sensor, sure, but it's probably just now cutting hairs and semantics.
But things that respond to that sensors are
Measurement, right? So IoT is about
Only
measurement,
Only
right?
measurement.
So like sensors that are measuring something, now we got that data back and we're doing something with it.
But if 1 hour back we were talking about having some processing capabilities
That was before
right
the
there on
code
the edge. So if your sensor suddenly is smart enough to run machine learning algorithms, is it still a thing?
Still
is it still the
a
same
Still a
thing?
sensor. I would make
If you
the
take
argument.
if you take the sensor away, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What makes it IoT is the sensor. If you
Okay.
happen to make it it's going to sound really stupid, a smart sensor, because
Uh-huh.
we're doing some processing, all it is just a more efficient sensor that's doing more than one thing.
Or combining sensors.
We're combining sensors. So I'll give you a better example.
I'll throw one other thing in here: sensors and actuators of some sort.
Okay,
Right?
perfect example.
So,
No.
continue. Sorry.
So you have a headlight on your car. That is a light. Because you've attached it to a car, doesn't make it not a light. Right? It's still a light, it just happens to be attached to a car. Or I have a flashlight that's on the cell phone, it's still a light. Right? And that's the same thing with putting the, on a sensor, putting that machine learning on the sensor is more or less that same analogy.
Okay.
Just thinking of something else. Is Darth Vader recharging every night?
I think so. Like he has to plug in, right?
Yeah. Or
And he
later
has
night.
that actually capsule,
He has a capsule.
so probably he's charging.
He's charging.
And how does it communicate? Like the thing is that now there are multiple
Using
stuff
the
like
force.
LoRa.
Using force. Yeah.
Yeah, using the force, but it's forced LoRa, it's forced Wi-Fi, it's forced anything, it's forced low technology.
This is what
or
we've
the
got.
early GSM.
The ship just got riddled.
What's the next big layer of
20 people are
networking
on
Could be
more
anything.
things?
The communication layer could be anything. If we're getting philosophical about IoT and Internet of Things, it's a device that communicates. It can communicate however it wants, whether it's a mesh network or.
But what's your vision? What's your vision about technology, the state of technology? This is a tech evaluation of the future things, because we have Sigfox, but we have limitations about Sigfox. We have LoRa, but we have limitations
Did you
about
say
the
Sigfox?
Yeah,
That's actually the thing.
Oh, it's SIG-FOX. Okay.
Sorry, I
The Dutch always bring it down to the gun.
So you guys don't. So you guys don't say Sigfox?
No, that's good. That's the best product.
Ask what Zammel means in Dutch.
Zammel? Yeah, Zammel's fine.
So I'll take a stab at your question, though. To me, it doesn't matter what the communication layer is. It matters what the end use case is. I'm a massive fan of what does it do, and how does it measure something, change something, do something. So whatever the most efficient way for someone to come up with that is, that's the one that should be used. Whatever they can get an advantage of in the marketplace to do that, whether it's lower power, faster integration, broader spectrum, that's the right answer for that application and that use case. It's going to vary based on what the end output you want. And if you start chasing after one type of this has got to be the perfect protocol. It's not going to work for everything. It's just not. So you need to take a look at them individually. In an individual, what are you trying to accomplish from a business, almost from a business use case, to go back to, okay, now what do we do build from the technology standpoint?
So you are using LTE?
Yep.
And you're not using Sigfox or LoRa or anything?
Well, can't even do it, can we? So we
I have to look at this chart.
It's the accent.
All of our,
In Dutch we say Sigfox, so it's a more G thing. And then, now I understand. Yeah.
no, so we use all of our stuff LTE enabled just for the fact it's pervasive. It's easy, it's simple. It gets the job done for what we need to do, and for the end user, when they pull a watch out of the box and put it on, it just works. They don't have to configure anything, they don't have to line anything up, they don't have to worry about anything at all. They turn it on and it works, and that's as simple as it needs to be. And the simpler you can make that use case, especially if you have some interaction with an individual, and especially a senior individual that we do, that has to be, it just has to work.
So do you consider using other technologies and then?
Yeah, so like in the watch itself, there's NSD, there's Wi-Fi, there's BLE, there's, I mean, we've got.
So you don't care as long as it works.
Well, and actually, I mean, going back to, you know, they originally started by building building their own wearable, and they had an in-home. I was the acting CTO for the Microsoft Ventures Accelerator in Seattle at the time when they went through it in 2014, which is crazy because it was a long time ago, and we were like raw and young, and they were young and pretty. But they had a hub, and they had devices that were being worn around the house, and fortunately we helped them pivot away from that. But you know, the communication between the band that they were building and the hub, that could be whatever protocol they wanted it to be, and the hub was speaking Wi-Fi to get out, right? In the pivot, they've partnered with somebody who can do it much simpler for the end user, because one of the problems that we had was how does somebody set this up? Right? How do you pair? How do you configure? Yeah. How do you pair? How do you figure out?
It has to be truly plug and play.
Let me tell you about
just
my
turn
question.
on.
Why my
Turn
question?
on, like a TV set.
Yeah.
Turn on, and it's working.
Okay, the question is, why my question? Because telcos in Portugal are announcing the next thing about
5G?
Getting a kind of consumer things that work going. And that's the why of my question. That's the reason of my question.
Okay.
Tech, how do you evaluate this?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm coming from a telco background. What we do is connectivity, and then you need to think about the application that you're doing. And I talked to Portuguese Telecom, and they do IoT and smart metering, but they do it in an area. You need to think about your interoperability. If it's a moving object, and if it's a big telematics, and there are guys that do Sigfox also. But that's not the reason. It's also in the box. How do you get the device in there? And at the end of the time, it's also important how investment in exactly we need to account that. So accessibility, interoperability, business case, where's going to be your device, Europe, or you're going to do something outside. And yeah, so there are lots of things to think about before you just roll out.
Yeah.
Because I see GSM coming back, GSM, and things like GPRS,
99% of our
and things like
customers
this.
are doing, and we have in 160 countries, we have devices, and they do GSM.
So there's multiple questions that there are multiple things that I just heard you guys talk about, and so one is the radio stack. You know, what is the RF stack that you're using to get from your device to somewhere else, and then the second thing is what are the protocols that go across that, right? And so
And how much data do you need to send?
Well, and that is going to affect the protocols and the connectivity, right? So if you're sending, you know, terabytes worth of data, I've got one customer that is each of their devices is producing roughly a terabyte an hour worth of data. Just to, you know.
Is that a Formula One car?
No, actually, surprisingly, close, but not.
Could be a wind generator, for instance.
I'll point back to John. How much of that terabyte is actually relevant? How much of it does it really need to do something?
And so actually there's another of my customers is producing close to 8 petabytes worth of data over the course of a flight, right? They need all that data, but not everybody needs all that data. different parts of the company need different parts of the data, right? In the case of the one that's producing a terabyte, they've got 3,000 of these things that are out there, and again, different parts of the company need different parts of the data, right? And so,
But do they need all that data? Meaning, so let's just say you need a terabyte of it. You're the part of the company, and it's a sensor and a flight, and the sensor takes a reading every 5 seconds, and it's a 12-hour flight, right, from Portugal to New York or something. And do they only care about the deltas, right? So that drastically affects, like, so that you don't
that's
have.
a huge question that I argue with them over all the time.
Oh, so they want all the data. I understand. I'm thinking like an architect. I'm thinking like an architect asking an architect.
You and I mind melded on this one a long time ago. Before we even knew this was a question.
From my experience, if they think they need all the data, it usually means they don't know what they need.
No. So in the case that he's talking about there, we are software architects. These are data scientists.
Oh, so they want data.
So what will happen on your Fitbit? It's my heart rate monitor. I have 91 beats per minute, which is actually pretty high.
He's very excited.
If the sensor fails for like, good point. That's what the beer are taking out. So if it fails for like, however, if it does it every second, every half second, if the sensor fails, it's basically programmed to give you the last reading. Right? After about 3 or 4 times, it'll give you like an error condition. But it's basically saying like, yeah, you know, you're moving around a little bit and it might miss 1 or 2. It's like not a big deal. So we think like software architects, and this is a non-mission critical thing. Cool. Airplane, they're thinking like data scientists. They're like, no. Like, we need every single data point. Right, exactly. Give me all of it.
And the other question to that too is, you may need it all, but when do you need it? How close to real time do you need it? How often do you have to access it? I mean, those are all
Can
things
you partition it?
So back to this customer that's got that's producing a terabyte an hour. There's actually a fraction of that, and it is in the megabytes an hour that they actually need in real time. And the rest of it is actually sneakerware. We've got a rack of hard drives that sits in the chassis. We pull them out and we go drop them in another rack.
It's
sneakerware. Yeah. And but the handful of megabytes we actually send over satellite. And it's an extraordinarily expensive connection.
You can use my satellites.
But it's an expensive proposition to send data, and so we send as little as possible. We sneakerware, and you
have the celestial constellation, right?
Spire Global.
Yeah.
And so there, the protocol is the RF stack is dictated to us just by where the vehicle happens to be, which is not in cellular range. And then the protocol is fuck protocols because it adds weight to what we need for it to be.
So it's raw.
We're sending a small binary packet when we have to. And so that, now rewind back to, are you going to have to play nicely with others? So is a device that has to play nicely with others. So if you're in the consumer space and you're producing devices that where you get to control like you guys, when you started out, you built the band and you built the hub. Great, you get to control that protocol and the RF stack. If you wanted to integrate with one of the ones that actually won, unlike you guys. And actually built a hub, right? You would kowtow to whatever their specification was. You use their radio stack and you use their protocols, and that actually in the industrial space is what happens. Is that you are playing nicely with others and you are working on their network and you are working on their protocols.
Yeah. So basically GE and Siemens.
Yep. And so back to I don't know your name over there. So back to your point, if the telecoms are producing, or setting up, they're deciding on what the radio stack is going to be, and they're probably deciding what the protocols are going to be.
Yeah, and still the fastest protocol is still the mail.
In our case, we don't advise. We just try to get out of that. For us, IoT is more like gigabytes of data, small piece of data. We tend to advise customers, to zip that data and to extract the important part. Because we work in national roaming, and for us, it's very expensive. If you push that.
Absolutely. And then it's back to Stevenson's point earlier, it's electricity at that point in time. You're getting a certain amount of voltage at a certain frequency, and a certain number of amps, fine. That's what you're getting, deal with it. So I don't buy into the whole, oh, this protocol versus that protocol, this other thing. No. That's somebody else's decision. I'm going to build what is going to, I'm going to build on the current electrical standard.
That's not worth the time.
That amount of data just kind of raised me one question. Why the hell are we still on binary then? You know, the most efficient radix is not binary. It's trinary, if you want, ternary, right? So how come we're still lost in the
Quantum computing.
Yeah.
Well,
When we get to quantum computing, it will force the switch.
Yep.
It's just too much built on top of binary.
Really?
Everything is built on top of binary.
Because if we're using ternary, we could have
You
a
are
whole more
correct.
efficient.
But we also have to change basically
Everything.
Everything has to have a service pack.
So
Yeah.
we change
Like,
everything
or
when we
rewrite.
start using binary. So.
Yeah. So when we get quantum computing, we'll start moving there. Because obviously, because quantum computing gives you the 3 states.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
One more question.
One question is about Xbox. What this has to do with IoT? Okay, cool. The thing is, I have 2 Xboxes on 360. The thing is, every home in America, in every 5 homes, 4 have a Xbox, a PlayStation, whatever.
A console.
A console, whatever, a gaming stuff.
Console.
How can this help IoT to be adopted in consumer?
Yeah, that's what they also did with the Xbox One. So it's also a media center, and you can do just basically Windows on it. And you can even make it your answering machine for your phone, record this video streams for your cameras.
It's like a foot on the door, right? It's like a foot on the door.
And there's also
It's still not useful, but it's
Well, that's the thing. So
that's
I
the problem.
had to take my Philips Hue bulbs out because my wife kept turning the lights out. After threatening divorce, and she stopped turning the lights out, the maids turned the lights out. Or my daughter turns the lights out. So like, yeah, there's really just not that good of use cases to say that because we have a console in the house, IoT is going to get adopted. When the better use cases come, and they will for consumer, that's what will drive adoption overnight.
Yep.
like with the security.
So for example, right now all join is actually a standardized protocol, and the Xbox supports
and
it.
it sucks.
And nobody's producing devices that actually talk to it. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a standardized protocol.
I
that's already
got
built
at
into
least
it.
3 different devices that are all joint compatible when ready. They do not talk to each other.
Yeah, and for instance, with the use case with the security cams at the moment, I think it's very useful to have a security camera in your home, but you always watch it afterwards. So you're being robbed, and you can watch what's been stolen yesterday. That's not useful.
It's forensics.
Yeah, it's forensics. So,
It will be useful for the police.
That's my wife being killed there. Yeah, now I see it on video. Yeah, excellent. But she won't go
Good, you're
away.
on the that dark in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but that's why security cams, for instance, are useless. A lot of IoT use cases just don't make sense at the moment for consumers.
So, any more questions?
Just one more. Why aren't Xbox or PlayStations or the fridge or the washing machine providing means to communicate with other physical devices? Why do we still need to have a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino or whatever, and not have these capabilities of interfacing with real world things? And
Well, go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January, and you'll see that all current models of everything has it.
The problem you get into, especially so one of my other partners makes connected a fridge with a big tablet on it and shit. How often do you buy a new fridge? How often do you buy a new tablet?
Yes.
So now you're sitting there with something in your kitchen that's
Takes 20 years.
It's like, okay, it still cools everything, but it looks like shit and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it was neat from 5 years ago.
Yeah, but
Are you going to buy a new fridge?
But for example, an Xbox or a PlayStation, you buy a new one every 3-4 years.
So let's go back to Xbox has. I mean, it's running Windows 10, right? And it's got all join, which is a standardized protocol, and so it can wirelessly talk to devices. But I mean, Stephen, tell me, would you invest in a consumer device, a device that is going to be in the house that people could plug random wires into that are connected to other devices that you can't control?
No, but yeah, no. I can't even come up with a but.
Yeah, that's the. So,
But you're making a good point there. You're saying cables in there. Because the other option is wireless. And wireless makes such a huge
Mess.
noise in your house. It's just completely unusable after, if you go up after 100 devices or so.
You don't even need that.
it's tough. It's tough.
You
I
and
mean,
your neighbors.
Yeah,
all
my
use
Nest,
it.
my Nest cameras all the time get the noise. And I've even went as far as putting in like the 5G and the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz and having a network only for the Nest. And yeah, it doesn't matter. It's the neighbors, Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
everything.
we eventually end up doing that because people buy Sonoffs or whatever, ESPs, whatever, and they all talk Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever, and they use the same frequency. So you're not providing a device that can talk wiredly or wirelessly to other devices, but people still do that. They still open the plug on the light switch and they fit in an ESP and they now can turn on the light wirelessly. So
There's a device which you can buy.
Yeah.
And it has about a 180 angle you can fold it to, and it disturbs any Wi-Fi from somebody else. So if you stick them to the walls, your neighbors won't have any receivers, but you will actually have an awesome Wi-Fi receiver.
Your neighbors like you, don't they?
Yeah, because why don't I get any reception anymore?
Okay.
Something is wrong with my router.
What happened?
Any more questions? Really?
okay, perfect.
Okay, so thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sean.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks again.
Okay, maybe next year we'll be here also. I promise to have more beer. More
We
chocolate.
stole the beer from a different.
Yeah, for the,
You literally did.
Let's correct this. This was the only way for you guys to have cold beer because there are, a couple of dozen six packs there, but they're not cold. So if you want a cold beer, you have to.
Appreciate that.
Josh's team went and got it.
They're awesome.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Josh.
incidentally, where you live, if you steal the six packs, nobody will. So, bye bye.
So, I don't know if I want to have dinner after this chocolate.
So we should exchange.
Yeah.
Were you at Web Summit last year?
You have to remember.
Yeah, it's the place too familiar.
Oh, shit.
Saying something bad?
I think it's something.
I believe in that.
Awesome. I have run out of cards.
Oh, it's on sale.
So,
You have good views of the world there.
awesome. New service for the Web Summit.
Oh, your
can
cards
print
are
your
remarkably small.
Like next year you have like your place to print your cards.
There should be an app. Not called the Web Summit Spam app because that was this. I'm happy the summit's over because I can actually delete the app. It was so spammy.
Well,
Did you get? I'm actually not listed as an investor because I was listed as a speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Last year I was listed as
I
a.
got probably 30 some odd messages through it, but it's not.
I got about 75 a day.
Yeah. So I got.
So
we
maybe
don't wanna
maybe
quantify
they
it.
scrape the word capital up the thing.
Yeah. You're
So
more
my
fun.
question is, you get one for the Kazakhstan Telecom. I think everyone I knew got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they want to spend $1 billion or something.
Yeah, it's great fun though.
I think what happens is they're a diamond sponsor, so I think they were allowed to spam the entire company.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's one. You guys aren't from Kazakhstan Telecom, right? Okay, cool.
I mean,
Well,
yes.
I mean, if you are, it's okay. Just
You're
don't.
not from Kazakhstan. You hear the accent like, and he's slowly walking away.
I'm not from Kazakhstan. Landlocked country.
Pretty big.
It's rather large.
Yeah.
Boston's got a party right?
Ignore the size.
The blink?
And it's the central of Asia.
Dead sick.
This one?
Pedro.
I'm going to.
A lot of speakers are going over there.
Alright, you should go together, right?
Yeah, for sure.
PJ and me.
Remember the pizzeria last time?
Didn't hear
Can
anything
you go
yet.
there?
They have beer for this one.
Yes.
Well, I will berate.
Liters and liters of it.
See, there you go. Everyone's happy. You did drop off on your food.
He's still trying to get
There was no deal. Just use her because not doing well.
Josh?
Just little doesn't count.
I understand. I'm drinking beer. Yes, sir. Pardon, Josh.
Here is my
You're
favorite.
driving?
My favorite use case for
I
it.
have no idea what
You
it
take
is.
it and you stick it into the door.
That's
The whole door.
Ah,
Is
but
that
it
the
sucks.
Amazon-
It will
the Amazon
smash.
Oh, the dash button?
So what's this called?
This is a
I
dashboard.
have yet to find
Looks like a
a.
What does it do?
It has an SDK and you can program it.
It says Amazon here, so I know what
It's
it is.
literally a button.
That
That's
you
all it
order,
does.
automatically order something.
Ah,
And the
I
something
honestly, I push it, and it costs me money to push the button. So if I sit there and start pushing it, who owns this one? Okay, I just cost them a bunch of money.
yeah.
That's it.
So basically, this is a direct access to Jeff Bezos' pocket money.
You
Want to make Jeff more rich? Press the
I
button.
will say, I was changing the baby diaper, and then I reached in, and it felt 5, 6 diapers.